I just want to continue right now our series on Elijah that we've been covering this summer. It's called Prophet of Fire and Rain. And last week, we got to the story about fire. These are stories about Elijah. We got last week to the climactic story of Elijah's life, which is his confrontation with the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel. And that story had so much in it for us. And sometimes when you read Elijah, you can think he almost seems like a superhero, like he's not like me. But in fact, the Bible goes out of its way to tell us that Elijah is a lot like us. He's not very different from who we are. In the story last week, he was confronting the prophets of Baal. The prophets of Baal, Baal is a god of rain and dew, and the king of Israel, his name is Ahab, he's been leading the people to worship Baal, which involved, among other things, human sacrifice. And while that was going on, while the king was leading people to worship Baal and not to worship God, Elijah was given a word from God to go and tell Ahab that it wouldn't rain or dew again until he said so. This was to prove that, God is in control of everything. So time went on, 3.5 years of drought followed, and a famine ensued. And what happened is that then God said to Elijah, go to Ahab and tell him, hey, it's going to rain soon. And not only that, I propose a contest. And you'll remember from last week, if you were here, that in this contest, Elijah kind of gave the other side all the advantages. He gave them home field advantage because he went to the place where they worship, their kind of headquarters. He allowed himself to be outnumbered. There were 850 total prophets there, and so he was outnumbered. He gave them the chance to go first and to have what they thought was the best time of day to ask God in the morning, basically, ask their God in the morning to send fire from heaven. And the contest was whoever's sacrifice was consumed first by fire was the true God. And in this contest, the prophets of Baal, they went first and they cried and they wailed and they cut themselves and did everything they could to get Baal to do something, but nothing happened. And so then Elijah gets up there. He rebuilds an altar out of 12 stones. That's where our stones from last week came from. And he puts wood on top of this sacrifice, or top of this altar, and then he cuts up a bowl and he puts that on top of the altar. And he starts praying. And he prays a quiet, personal prayer to God, and he asks God to please come and show that he's God. And so immediately, fire fell from heaven. It consumed his sacrifice, as well as the wood and the rocks. Oh yeah, and the gallons of water that he poured on his sacrifice. Just licked it all up. And so the people fell on their faces and they said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. And so the people realized, because all of Israel had come to watch this, thousands of spectators were on hand for this contest. They realized, hey, Elijah stands for the true God. The God of Israel is the true God. And so he's our God. And that's where we pick up the story. Let's look. If you're looking at your Bible, it's in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 40. It says, then Elijah commanded, seize all the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one of them escape. And so the people seized them all. And Elijah took them down to the Kishon Valley and killed them there. Welcome to River City Church. He killed them. 450 of them, prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Asherah we can expect also died here. 850 people just wiped out. So what's going on here? You might say, well, yeah, wow, that's God's pretty harsh. But I want you to focus on something else here. And that is that these prophets, they were living, being the prophets of false gods during a time where there was a drought, and they said that their God had power over the water. and they were living somehow off the goodwill of the king and queen. And they have misled the people of Israel also to worship false gods and to sacrifice even their own children to these false gods. And so when I look at this story, and when you look at it, I want you to understand there's something more going on here than just the fact that, boy, the Old Testament, it's a bloody book. There's a principle embedded here for us to take note of. And that's this, that there are consequences for intentional disobedience. There are consequences for intentional disobedience. When we started this story, or when we started this series, I started off with the principle that blessing follows obedience. But you know, the other side of that is true, that there are consequences for intentional disobedience. These people they not only were worshiping a false god, but when the drought came, that was proving that they were wrong, they just pressed in all the more to their false god, to their false religion. And they were misleading everyone else in the nation to do the same thing. And there's something to just take note of here. And that is that our choices can lead us, our choices, intentional choices, can lead us to trouble in life. And I just say this, just on the side. Some of you're dealing with kids or with grandchildren who are needing to grow up. And I want to encourage you today, stop rescuing them from their problems. If you keep rescuing your kids or your grandchildren from their problems will grow with them because they'll not get the point of what their bad choices are leading them to. In this story, thousands of people have watched this confrontation between Baal, the false god, and the true God, the God of Israel. And the consequence is that these people who've been lying, these people who've been leading them to false worship, they die on the spot. The story continues. Verse 41. Then Elijah said to Ahab, that's the king, go get something to eat and drink. That's important because what it suggests here is that Elijah is inviting Ahab to come back to the community of faith. Because in the ancient world, when you offered a sacrifice, the sacrifice was followed by a meal. It was a way to sit down with other people you'd been worshiping with and to commemorate the occasion. And so that's basically what Elijah's saying to Ahab here. He's saying, hey, okay, now you see what's true, now you know what's real, so now come, go ahead, sit down, have a meal, reflect on what's happened. And then he says this to him, for I hear a mighty rainstorm coming. I hear a mighty rainstorm coming. Now, in this story that we're going to read today, I think that there are multiple lessons about faith. And this sentence here, for I hear a mighty rainstorm coming, that's our first lesson about faith. Because in this story, right, they've not seen any clouds for 3.5 years. It's been the same forecast every day for 3.5 years. Blue skies, you're going to see the stars at night, there's no fog, there's no dew, there's not a drop of rain, there's no cloud anywhere. But suddenly, it doesn't say that he saw any evidence that this was happening. He just says, I hear a mighty rainstorm coming. And I want to point something out to you about the nature of faith. I think it's the principle that's embedded in this verse. And it's this: faith hears, sees, and knows things that aren't yet a reality. Faith hears, sees, and knows things that aren't yet a reality. Elijah is someone who has the sense in his heart that things are getting ready to change dramatically. And he starts to act on it. Now, what's faith? The Bible gives us a great definition in Hebrews, in the New Testament, Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we cannot see. That's what faith is. Some people, when they hear the word faith, they think only of belief. In other words, if I just believe something really hard, then it's going to happen. But that's not really what the picture of biblical faith is. It's not just believing in something, but it's trusting in something. I might put it in this equation, that faith is belief plus trust equals faith. Belief plus trust equals faith. In other words, I need to not just believe the right things about God, but then I need to trust them. I need to put the weight of my life onto it. And this is what Elijah is starting to do. This is what's great about his example here, is he has a sense of what God's going to do, and then he's going to start to act on it. Now, and so in this case, it's not enough that you believe there's a God. It's not enough that he believes it's going to rain. He actually begins to trust it. He begins to rely on it. And the thing that you need to know about faith is that sometimes real faith sounds crazy. Sometimes real faith sounds like insanity. I've seen it again and again and again. Sometimes when somebody receives an awful diagnosis or prognosis from the doctor, and the doctor says you're going to die in 2 months, and they say, no, I believe God's going to heal me, and I'm going to live a long life. And then it happens. I've seen it. Happens. That's what faith is like. But when the person says it, you think they're a little bit crazy. Or maybe there's a relationship that becomes profoundly broken. I've known numbers of people in my life who got a divorce. And then later somehow God brought their relationship with their ex-spouse to reconciliation, and they remarried and had a long, happy life together. It does happen, but when the person first says it, hey, I know I'm divorced, but God's gonna fix it, you think, oh, really? Sounds a little crazy. Or maybe when somebody's given an idea for a business, in some way that they say, God's given me this idea about this business that I can start. This is a way that God's gonna provide for me and my family and for a lot of people. And they tell you the idea and you think, I don't think that's ever gonna work. Are you crazy? That's just not possible. But it actually happens. I can remember when I was a kid, and I'd be watching, the Jetsons cartoons. And these people would be talking on their phone on their wristwatch. Or pictures of people from other places would come up and they'd have that as a telephone conversation. Or you'd see something like that in Star Trek and you'd think, oh, that's cool. Oh, that'll never happen. Guess what? It happened. Happened on my phone. Happened on my watch, It happened. That's the way faith starts. Very often faith sees things that aren't yet a reality. Very often faith claims things that sound crazy to those outside the realm of faith. So then the story goes on. Verse 42, it says, Ahab went to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel and bowed low to the ground and prayed with his face between his knees. I'll just spare you. I tried this morning. It doesn't work real well for me, but maybe you can do it. Congratulations. But what's happening here? He's going to the top of Mount Carmel, and like I said, this is a 12-mile long mountain range, and so he goes to the top of the mountain, and he evidently he doesn't go to a place where he can see the sea. We'll understand that in just a moment. He goes to this certain place and he starts praying, and he not only believes something's going to happen, but he starts to pray about it. And this is an important thing to understand about faith. And that's this. It's this principle that faith and active prayer are inseparable. Faith and active prayer are inseparable. In other words, when you have real faith about something God's going to do, it's not enough just to believe it. It's not enough just to think, oh yes, for sure, I think this is going to happen. That's not the idea. And then just like coast and see it happen. No, he believed it was going to happen, and then he started praying. And what's he doing by putting his head between his knees? He's just demonstrating his own humility before God, the fact that he has no way to make this happen. He has no way to make it rain, but he knows that God does. So the two go together. Faith and active prayer. When you want for God to do something, you should expect that you might move with that prayer. That's part of the reason why we raise our hands the way that we do. That's part of the reason why when we pray to God, many people are praying out loud, because we know that active prayer accompanies faith. When active prayer accompanies faith, look what happens. James chapter 5, verses 16 to 18. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. He says the earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. Elijah was human as we are. And yet, when he prayed earnestly that no rain would fall, none fell for 3.5 years. Then, when he prayed again, the sky sent down rain and the earth began to yield its crops. You know what I see here? When you pray, when you have active prayer that's matched with faith, this is what happens. Faith can shape reality. Faith can shape reality. Now, I'm not saying without God. This assumes that you're putting faith in God. But I'm saying to you, sometimes when we pray, we have the idea that God could maybe do it. Or God might, he might do something that's kind of like an answer to my prayer. But in Elijah's case, the skies open up. Rain falls in a flood-like fashion. You're going to see it in a few moments. And what happens from that is that the earth starts to yield crops, and so the power of this famine that's killing people is broken. Faith can shape reality. Look at verse 43. Then he said to his servant, "Go and look out toward the sea." And the servant went and looked, and then returned to Elijah and said, "I didn't see anything." Now, he is likely he's near a part of the Mount Carmel that can look over into the Mediterranean Sea. And so the idea here is, Elijah, he's maybe like near the top, and he's sending this guy all the way to the top and over some to look and see if he sees rain coming on the sea. And it says that he did it 7 times. Elijah told him to go and look. 7 times. Let me tell you, you're running up a hill, you're running up a mountain, up at the top of the mountain, and you're running down some, and you're looking out at the sea. After a couple of times that Elijah told you this, let me tell you, you'd start to get a little bit tired of it. You would be like, I'm just going to make something up. This is getting really old. I mean, there's a lot of action involved here. And the thing is, this servant, maybe he's breathing heavy. Maybe he's starting to feel it. Maybe he's feeling a little agitated and he's sweating. What's the principle we can get from this? These 7 times that Elijah told him to go and look and see if a cloud was coming. This is the principle that faith determines never to give up on God, even when circumstances are discouraging. Right? Because the sky has been absolutely clear for 3.5 years. Why in the world is it going to be any different today? Except that Elijah believes it will be different today. And the thing is, with Elijah, he believes, and he keeps on believing, even the 7th time that he sends the servant to go see what's going on with the skies over the sea, where the rain would be coming from. That's how Jesus described faith. He says it like this in Matthew 21:21, "I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, Look at this. You can say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and it will be done. Jesus is saying, hey, the key to faith is not just like believing the right things. The key to faith is not just having a little bit of it because it's so powerful. The key to faith is that you believe and you keep on believing even when things might discourage your belief. Now, think about Elijah for a minute. Do you remember when this boy died? We read a few weeks ago, there was a boy died in the house where he was staying. How many times did he have to pray for that boy? 3 times, that's right. And then when he was on the mountain and he's with the sacrifice and all the people are gathered and the prophets of Baal and all that, and they've been praying all day, and he comes up, he has water, gallons of water poured on his sacrifice. And he's supposed to pray that fire would come from heaven and devour the sacrifice. How many times does he have to pray? 1 time, just once. And then here, when it comes to the rain, he has to pray 7 times. What in the world is going on? I mean, is it harder somehow to get it to rain than it is to get fire to come from heaven? Is it harder to raise a boy from the dead than it is to get rain to come? Or reversed? I mean, they all seem kind of difficult to me, don't misunderstand. But what I'm wanting you to see here is he had to keep praying. He had to press through discouraging circumstances. And the thing is, with you and your life and my life, when it comes to praying, sometimes it takes praying many times. Now, I could come up with all kinds of maybe fancy explanations. I don't think any of them would be right or serve justice to this problem. But the fact is, you might have to pray once for something. You might have to pray 3 times for something. You might have to pray 7,000 times for something. And here's what I'd say the reason for that is, that's just the way it is sometimes. That's just the way it is sometimes. Sometimes we're needing to prevail in prayer and prevail in faith and prevail in our trust of God because something's happening in that exercise. Something's happening in that journey. I think about when I met my wife. It was August 1987. I had a Levi's blue jean jacket on, by the way, back in 1987. And I met Tracy, first class at college. It was 8 a.m. U.S. history. I never took an 8 a.m. course again because that was hard hour for me at that point in my life. But I saw her the first day in the first class, and I just thought she was just hot. And so I just started approaching her, probably she felt maybe I was stalking her, I don't know, but I was trying to get to know her. And I was asking her out. One time I asked her out, and she said, well, I don't think my boyfriend would like that. That didn't go so well. But most of the time when I was asking her out, it was like she just was blowing me off, or she was like, oh, whatever. And it just wasn't really going anywhere. And there must have been dozens of conversations, And it just didn't seem to go anywhere. It took 2.5 years. When she's considering this, I mean, come on, 2.5 years? No, just kidding. But the thing is, yeah. I want you to think about something. Over and over, I kept asking. And every time I'd ask, I wasn't getting closer to yes, but I was getting closer to Tracy. And you know, it's the same thing when we come to God with our needs over and over and over. We're not necessarily getting closer to yes, but we're getting closer to God. And maybe that's what's going on with Elijah. I don't know. Maybe that's why he's got to pray 7 times and send his servant up the hill and over to see if a cloud is coming on the sea yet. Because in this exercise of prevailing in his faith, he's somehow growing closer to God. You may not be getting closer to yes these many times you've asked God to meet your need, but you're getting closer to him. Well, the story continues. Verse 44. Finally, the 7th time, his servant told him, I saw a little cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea. It's like this, right? It's a tiny thing he sees. And in fact, I have to imagine, he's like going over there the 7th time. He's going up the hill. He's walking over. He's looking out in the distance. He's like, it might be something in my eye, but I'm going to just tell him something's there. But Elijah, when he hears this, he shouts, hurry to Ahab, the king. Tell him, climb into your chariot, go back home. If you don't hurry, you're going to be stuck in the mud. If you don't hurry, the rain will stop you. That's how much rain's coming from this little cloud the size of a man's hand. I heard it. I heard the mighty rainstorm, and then I saw just the smallest trace of proof that it was coming. And now I'm certain it's going to be a flood in Israel. That's the nature of faith. Elijah wasn't waiting for raindrops. He was expecting that God would answer him in a mind-blowing way, with imagination exceeding generosity. That's how he thought God was going to answer his prayer. And why is this? What's the principle here for us? Faith expects that God will deliver big on his promises. Faith expects that God will deliver big on his promises. God answers us in ways that go way beyond what we thought he would do to answer us in the first place. I spoke with a woman after the first service. She said, that's me. That happened to me this week. I said, well, what happened to you this week? She said, I've had problems with my teeth for months now. And I've not been able to find a doctor to accept my insurance. I've not been able to figure out what's going on here. And it's just bothering me every single day. I can't stand it. And she said, finally, I was in my art class, and some people in there knew about what my situation was. And she said, I went to my art class, and somebody in the class said to me, hey, you need to go see this other dentist. And so she said, well, he's not on my plan. She said that her person in her art class said, hey, don't worry about it. She said, the class and I, we've gotten together. We're going to pay for this expensive job to be done. Don't worry about it. She says, that's me. That's me. God provided for me in a way that blew my mind. This is how God responds to his children. This is how God responds to faith and active prayer, in ways that exceed our expectations, in ways that go beyond what we thought that he could deliver. That's how God is responding to Elijah. So then it comes next in verse 45 and 46. And soon the sky was black with clouds. A heavy wind brought a terrific rainstorm, and Ahab left quickly for Jezreel. Now, Jezreel is this place. It's halfway between Mount Carmel and Samaria, where Ahab's palace is. It's the summer palace for Ahab. And it's about 15 miles, just to give you some context. And this is what it says. Then the Lord gave special strength to Elijah. I want you to take note of that. He needed special strength because he's been there on the mountainside all day. He waited for the prophets of Baal to do their thing, and then he built this altar, and then he had all the water poured on it, and he cut this bowl in pieces. I mean, it's almost dark. He's been praying for 7 times that this rain would come, and finally he knows it's coming. And so you would think he'd be worn out, but the Lord gave him special strength. And it says he tucked his cloak into his belt. He took his robe and he put it into his belt. It's what they call in the ancient world girding your loins. I'm so glad we don't talk like that anymore. But he tucked his cloak into his belt and he ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the entrance in Jezreel. All the way to the entrance of Jezreel. That's more than 15 miles. He's running at full speed. Now just think about it. What's Elijah been doing in this story, right? He's been laying around eating throughout all these stories. He went to the brook there in that one story, and the ravens came, brought him bread and meat, and he drank from the brook. And then in the next story, he's got this widow making him food every day. He's just laying around eating. He's not trained for a marathon. But here, he's given special strength to run for 15 miles and pass up the chariot. Then it says, he runs all the way to the entrance of Jezreel. God gave him supernatural strength. I think there's a principle here for us. And it's this: the faith grows the boldness to confront opposition and the strength to do the extraordinary. Remember, through this whole story, through these last 3.5 years, Elijah has been hiding from King Ahab because Ahab wanted to kill him. But now, faith has given him incredible strength to go and confront Ahab to his face. Not only that, he's been given special strength to run for 15 miles. And I'm telling you, this is the way that faith works in life. Maybe you've been facing a situation, it just seems too difficult. Maybe it's worn you down. Maybe you feel like you've been asking and asking and asking, and you're ready to give up. And what I'm saying to you today is, God gives special strength in the journey to those who trust him, believe in him. Elijah, he wasn't ready to go run 15 miles. But God gave him what he needed. And you know what? God will give you what you need. Some of you today, you've been praying for something for a long time. You've been looking for the answer for a long time. And it's worn you out. And I'm here today to encourage you through Elijah. Don't give up. Don't give up. What if I told you that spouse that you've been praying for years and years, what if I told you this was the year when you were going to get the answer you've been praying for? You wouldn't give up. What if I told you that medical problem you've been facing for months now, God was going to give an answer this next week? You wouldn't give up on him. What if I told you that business breakthrough that you've been working on for so long and you've been praying about it every single day? What if I told you it's going to happen? It's going to happen in 2 weeks. Don't give up. You wouldn't give up. You wouldn't stop praying. You wouldn't stop believing. And I'm saying to you today, don't stop believing. God answers the prayer of people filled with faith. And not only that, he gives them the strength to hold on until the answer comes. All Elijah sees is a little cloud. And it so encourages him that he can run 15 miles at full speed.